Look under the car. A voice no one was listening to. A homeless child. A ticking bomb. And a billionaire who had 30 seconds left to live before we begin. Hit that likes button, subscribe, and drop a comment below telling us where you're watching from and what time it is in your city right now. We love hearing from you. Now let's dive in. Vincent Reeves didn't believe in fear anymore. He buried that weakness decades ago, somewhere between his first million and his 50th courtroom battle. Now, stepping out of his midnight blue sedan in the dim underground parking garage, he moved with the calculated precision of a man who had survived worse than threats. His charcoal suit sat perfectly on his shoulders. His salt and pepper hair was combed back tight. Everything about him said control. Everything about him lied. Because the truth was, Vincent hadn't slept properly in 3 weeks. Not since his foundation tore apart, that trafficking ring. Not since they rescued 62 children from basements and shipping containers across 3 states. Not since the arrests started. And definitely not since the messages began arriving. Typed threats. Handwritten curses. Photos of his car. His office. His home. All of them said the same thing. You went too far. You'll pay. Vincent ignored them. Criminals always threatened. They rarely delivered. But this morning, something felt wrong. The garage was too quiet. The fluorescent lights overhead flickered weakly, casting long shadows between the concrete pillars. The air smelled strange. Metallic. Sharp. Like copper and burnt rubber. Vincent paused beside his car, frowning. His hand hovered over the door handle. His instincts, honed through years of dangerous negotiations and late-night standoffs with men who had nothing to lose, whispered a single word: stop. He scanned the rows of parked vehicles. Nothing moved. Just shadows and silence. A faint drip of water echoed somewhere in the distance. He exhaled slowly, shaking his head. He was being paranoid. Exhaustion was playing tricks on his mind. Too many late nights. Too many case files. Too much coffee, not enough sleep. Vincent opened the car door and slid into the driver's seat. The leather was cold against his back. He placed his briefcase on the passenger side and reached into his pocket for his keys. That metallic smell drifted past him again, stronger now, unmistakable. His hand froze halfway to the ignition. Something was wrong. He leaned forward slightly, peering through the windshield. The garage stretched out before him, empty and still. But then, just for a second, he saw it. A flicker of movement near the far end. A shadow shifting behind a concrete pillar. Vincent's eyes narrowed. He watched. Waited. Nothing. Just his imagination. Probably a rat. Probably nothing. He forced himself to breathe. He was a man who had stared down cartel lawyers, corrupt officials, and men with guns. He wasn't going to let an empty parking garage rattle him. He gripped the key tighter and pushed it toward the ignition. And then he heard it. A soft, broken gasp. Close. Too close. Vincent's entire body went rigid. Footsteps. Bare feet on cold concrete. Slow. Hesitant. Moving closer. He turned his head sharply, expecting to see a beggar or maybe some kid looking for loose change. Instead, he saw her. A little girl. No older than 9. Thin as a whisper. Her clothes were torn and dirty, a faded gray hoodie 3 sizes too big hanging off her bony shoulders. Her hair was a mess of tangled black curls falling around a face streaked with grime. But it was her eyes that stopped him cold. Wide. Terrified. Not afraid of him. Afraid for him. She stood there, trembling, one small hand raised toward him like she wanted to reach out, but couldn't find the courage. Her lips moved, but no sound came. Her chest heaved with shallow, panicked breaths. Vincent's jaw tightened. Kid, you shouldn't be here. This isn't safe. Her mouth opened again. Still nothing. Just a choked sob caught in her throat. And then she screamed. It wasn't loud. It wasn't hysterical. It was raw. Desperate. The kind of scream that came from witnessing something no child should ever see. Please don't start the car. Vincent froze. His hand hovered over the ignition, key half-turned. The girl stumbled forward, tears streaming down her face, her voice cracking as the words finally poured out. Please, sir, please. There's something under your car. If you start it, you're going to die. Every muscle in Vincent's body locked. He stared at her. Really stared. And for the first time in years, Vincent Reeves felt something he thought he'd forgotten. Pure, unfiltered fear. Vincent's heart hammered against his ribs. He stared at the little girl, searching her face for any sign of a prank, a lie, some kind of childish game. But all he saw was terror. Real bone-deep terror. The kind that didn't come from imagination. The kind that came from seeing something unspeakable. His voice came out rougher than he intended. What did you say? The girl's whole body shook. She pointed beneath his car with a trembling finger, her words tumbling out in broken gasps. Under the car, they put something there. 2 men. They wore masks. They said your name. They said you'd never see it coming. Vincent's blood turned to ice. Slowly, he pushed the car door open and stepped out. The girl flinched backward, but she didn't run. She stayed, watching him with those desperate, pleading eyes. When? Vincent asked, his voice deadly calm now. When did you see them? Early, she whispered. Before the sun came up. I was sleeping over there. She pointed to a dark corner near the stairwell where a flattened cardboard box lay crumpled against the wall. I heard them talking. They were angry. They kept saying your name. Vincent Reeves. They said you destroyed their business. They said you were going to pay. Vincent's jaw clenched so hard it hurt. He dropped to one knee, ignoring the sharp pain in his leg, and leaned down to look beneath the vehicle. And there it was. A small rectangular device strapped to the undercarriage with heavy-duty tape. Wires. Neatly bundled. Professional. A tiny red light blinked steadily in the shadows. Once per second. Patient. Waiting. Vincent had seen enough briefing photos from law enforcement to recognize the signature. Cartel work. Pressure triggered. The moment he started the engine, the moment the car moved even an inch, it would detonate. He would have been dead before he even knew what happened. Vincent pulled back slowly, his hands steady even though his mind was racing. He looked up at the girl. She stood there, hugging herself, tears cutting clean lines through the dirt on her cheeks. What's your name? He asked quietly. Zoe, she whispered. Zoe. Vincent rose to his feet, his voice softer now. How long have you been trying to warn people? Her face crumpled. Hours. I tried to tell the security guard when he came through. He told me to get lost. I tried to stop a lady getting into her car. She yelled at me, called me a little liar. Her voice broke completely. I waited. I didn't leave. I couldn't leave. Because I knew you'd come. And I knew nobody would believe me. Nobody ever believes me. Vincent felt something crack open inside his chest. Shame. Guilt. Rage. Not at her. At himself. At a world that had taught this child that her voice didn't matter. He pulled out his phone, his fingers moving fast. Zoe, listen to me very carefully. You just saved my life. Do you understand? You saved me. She shook her head fiercely, fresh tears spilling. Not yet. They're still here. Vincent's head snapped up. What? The men, Zoe whispered, her eyes darting toward the shadows. They didn't leave. They've been watching. Waiting. I saw them hiding by the delivery van near the exit. They wanted to make sure. She didn't finish. She didn't have to. They wanted to make sure he died. Vincent's phone was already at his ear. His voice dropped into a tone cold enough to freeze steel. This is Vincent Reeves. I'm in the underground garage at Hillcrest Plaza. There's an explosive device attached to my vehicle. I need bomb disposal, tactical units, and detectives immediately. Suspects are still on site. I repeat, suspects are on site. The operator's voice cracked with urgency. Sir, units are on the way. Do not approach the vehicle. Do not. I'm not going anywhere, Vincent said. He ended the call and stepped directly in front of Zoe, placing himself between her and the rest of the garage. Stay behind me. Don't move. Zoe grabbed onto the back of his jacket, her small fingers clutching the fabric like a lifeline. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder. Closer. Within 2 minutes, police cars screeched into the garage, tires squealing, lights flashing red and blue across the concrete walls. Officers poured out, weapons drawn, shouting commands. A tactical team rushed forward, securing the perimeter, pushing civilians back. One officer approached Vincent, breathless. Mr. Reeves, are you injured? No, Vincent said sharply. But she is the one you need to listen to. He glanced down at Zoe. She saw everything. A female detective knelt down, her face kind but serious. Sweetheart, can you tell me what you saw? Zoe's voice was barely audible. 2 men. Black masks. Gloves. They came before it was light. They had tools. They crawled under his car. They were whispering, but I heard them. They said his name. They said he ruined everything. They said this was just the beginning. The detective's expression hardened. She stood and spoke into her radio. All units, suspects may still be in the vicinity. Lock down the exits. Nobody leaves. Within minutes, the bomb squad confirmed what Vincent already knew. The device was live, professionally assembled, designed to kill. And then the call came through. We've got movement near the service van. 2 males. Matching the description. Everything happened fast. Officers swarmed the area. Shouts echoed through the garage. 2 men were dragged out from behind a white delivery van, their hands zip-tied, masks ripped off their faces. They cursed. They spat. They glared at Vincent with pure hatred burning in their eyes. One of them snarled as officers shoved him to the ground. You should have minded your own business, old man. You think you're some kind of hero? You're just a dead man walking. Vincent didn't respond. He simply placed a protective hand on Zoe's shoulder and turned her away from the scene. The detective returned, her face grim but respectful. Mr. Reeves, without this girl, you'd be dead. The device was set to detonate on ignition. You wouldn't have had a chance. Vincent looked down at Zoe. This tiny, forgotten child who had spent hours in a cold garage, hungry and afraid, waiting to save the life of a man she'd never met. Where's your mother, Zoe? Vincent asked gently. Zoe's face went pale. At work. She cleans offices at night. She thinks I'm at the shelter. The shelter? Vincent's brow furrowed. Why aren't you there? Zoe's voice dropped to a whisper, barely audible. Because the man who runs it, he's mean. He hits us when we cry. He locks the doors. I'd rather sleep outside. Vincent Reeves, a man who had faced down the worst humanity had to offer, felt his hands start to shake. Not from fear. From fury. Vincent crouched down so he was eye level with Zoe. His voice was steady, but underneath it ran a current of something dark and dangerous. What's your mother's name? Elena, Zoe whispered. Elena Carr. And where does she work? The big office building on Palmer Street. She cleans there every night. She doesn't get home until morning. Vincent turned to the detective. Find her. Now. Bring her here. The detective nodded and spoke quietly into her radio. Vincent stayed close to Zoe, watching as bomb technicians carefully dismantled the device under his car. Each wire they cut, each component they removed, was a reminder of how close he'd come. How close this little girl had come to watching him die. 20 minutes later, a woman came running across the garage. She wore a faded cleaning uniform, her hair pulled back in a messy bun, her face lined with exhaustion and worry. The moment she saw Zoe, she broke into a sprint. Zoe! Baby! Elena dropped to her knees and pulled her daughter into her arms, sobbing. What happened? Why aren't you at the shelter? Why didn't anyone call me? Zoe buried her face in her mother's shoulder, finally letting herself cry the way a child should. Mama, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I couldn't stay there anymore. Mr. Brennan, he. Who's Mr. Brennan? Vincent's voice cut through like a blade. Elena looked up, noticing him for the first time. Her eyes widened. You're Vincent Reeves. Answer the question, Vincent said quietly. Who is Mr. Brennan? Elena's face crumpled with shame. He runs the shelter where Zoe stays at night while I work. It's the only place I can afford. I thought she was safe there. The detective stepped forward. Ma'am, your daughter just saved Mr. Reeves' life. She witnessed 2 men plant an explosive device under his car. She tried to warn multiple people for hours. No one listened. But she didn't give up. Elena stared at her daughter, disbelief and pride and horror washing over her face all at once. You saved his life? Zoe nodded, still clinging to her mother. Vincent's jaw tightened. Detective, I want an immediate investigation into that shelter. Tonight. And I want this family under protective custody until we know if there are more threats. Already on it, the detective said. But Mr. Reeves, there's something else you should know. Vincent turned, his eyes sharp. What? The detective pulled out a tablet, showing him a file. We ran Elena Carr's name through our system. 3 years ago, she called in an anonymous tip about unusual activity at a warehouse on 4th Street. Late-night deliveries. Children's voices. Locked rooms. She was working as a cleaning contractor there. Vincent's breath caught. 4th Street. That was the Cordero operation, the detective finished. Your foundation's first major raid. 43 children recovered. Elena Carr's tip started that investigation. She never came forward. Never asked for recognition. She just called it in and disappeared. Vincent turned slowly to look at Elena. She sat on the cold concrete, holding her daughter, tears streaming down her face. She looked up at him with quiet dignity. I didn't know if anyone would believe me, Elena said softly. I was just a cleaner. Nobody important. But I heard those children crying at night. I couldn't just do nothing. Vincent felt something shift inside him. Something fundamental. Here was a woman who had risked everything to save children she'd never met, who worked 3 jobs to keep her daughter alive, who had raised a child brave enough to stand in front of death and scream a warning. And the world had called them nobody. Vincent knelt down beside them. Elena. Zoe. Look at me. They both turned, eyes red from crying. You are not nobody, Vincent said, his voice cracking for the first time that morning. You never were. 3 years ago, you saved 43 children. Today, your daughter saved me. And I'm going to make sure the world knows exactly who you are. Elena shook her head. Mr. Reeves, we don't need. Yes, you do, Vincent interrupted gently. You need safety. You need a home where Zoe doesn't have to sleep on cardboard. You need a job that doesn't break your back for pennies. And you need someone to finally say thank you. He stood and pulled out his phone, making 3 calls in rapid succession. The first was to his head of security, arranging immediate protection for Elena and Zoe. The second was to his foundation's director, opening emergency housing assistance. The third was to his personal lawyer, instructing him to draft an employment contract. When he finished, he turned back to them. Elena, my foundation needs someone who understands what we're fighting for. Someone who's seen the darkness and chose to fight it anyway. I'm offering you a position. Real salary. Benefits. Safe housing. And Zoe gets into our education program, with tutoring, counseling, everything she needs. Elena stared at him, speechless. Why? Why would you do this? Vincent's eyes glistened. Because 3 years ago, you saw something wrong and you spoke up. Today, your daughter did the same thing. And both times you saved lives. That's not luck. That's character. That's courage. And that's exactly what this world needs more of. By evening, news crews had arrived. The mayor held a press conference, calling Zoe a hero who reminded us that courage has no age. The police chief announced the arrest of the 2 cartel hitmen, crediting Zoe's bravery with breaking the case wide open. Donations poured into Vincent's foundation. People wanted to help. People wanted to know Zoe's story. But Vincent kept them at a distance. He made sure Zoe and Elena had space. Privacy. Time to breathe. A week later, Vincent met them at their new apartment. It wasn't huge, but it was clean, safe, warm. Zoe had her own room. Elena had a job that let her sleep at night. And for the first time in years, they had hope. Zoe sat at the kitchen table, drawing pictures with new colored pencils Vincent had brought her. She looked up at him with those same serious eyes that had seen too much too soon. Mr. Reeves, she said quietly, can I ask you something? Anything. Why did you believe me? Everyone else said I was lying. Everyone else told me to go away. But you listened. Why? Vincent pulled out a chair and sat down across from her. He was quiet for a long moment, staring at his hands. Hands that had signed checks, shaken hands with powerful people, built an empire. But hands that had almost failed to save his own life. You want the truth, Zoe, he said finally. She nodded. I almost didn't believe you, Vincent admitted, his voice heavy with regret. For just a second, when you first screamed at me, I thought about ignoring you. Getting in my car. Driving away. Because I was tired. Because I was in a hurry. Because I'd heard 100 people ask me for things, and I'd learned to tune them out. Zoe's eyes widened. But then I looked at your face, Vincent continued. And I saw something I recognized. Real fear. Not the kind people use to manipulate. The kind that comes from caring about someone you don't even know. You were terrified. Not for yourself. For me. A stranger. And that made me stop. He reached across the table and gently placed his hand over hers. Zoe, you taught me something that day. You taught me that the people we overlook, the voices we ignore, the faces we walk past without seeing, sometimes they're the ones holding our lives in their hands. And I'll never forget that. Never. Zoe's eyes filled with tears, but this time they were different. Not scared. Not sad. Just seen. Finally seen. You're going to do great things, Zoe, Vincent said softly. Not because I'm helping you, but because you already are great. You just needed someone to notice. She smiled. Small. Hesitant. But real. And Vincent Reeves, a man who had spent his entire life saving others, realized something profound. Sometimes being saved is the greatest gift you can receive. Because it reminds you why you fight in the first place. Not for glory. Not for recognition. But for the little girl in the parking garage who refused to stay silent. For the mother who made the call no one else would make. For the forgotten voices that turn out to be the loudest of all. So let me ask you something. Would you have stopped? Would you have listened? Or would you have been too busy, too tired, too distracted to hear the voice that could save your life? Zoe's story isn't just about bravery. It's about being seen. It's about refusing to give up on someone, even when the world has given up on you. If this story touched your heart, hit that like button. Drop a comment telling us what you would have done in Vincent's place. And subscribe because every week we bring you real stories of courage, redemption, and the heroes hiding in plain sight. Until next time, keep your eyes open. You never know who might be trying to save your life. See you in the next one.